first of all, we've seen plenty of leaks when it comes to this section of the budget, but do you hope there's a bit more that what's been leaked?
Oh, Laura, I think we're holding fire until tonight to learn the realities of what's been promised to aged care. If I can just say, one of the very frustrating things observing this conversation over the last few days has been this sense of kind of the government sort of patting itself on the back for increasing funding to this sector, when in fact the government itself is the one that's brought this sector to its knees. They have cut year on year while Scott Morrison was Treasurer, in fact, to the point where today we've got an aged care system where 2/3 of residents in aged care are malnourished or at risk of being malnourished. These are people who are in the care of the Australian government and they're literally not getting enough nutrition every day. We've got a homecare waitlist that's got 100,000 people on it, and tragically in the last 2 years 26,000 Australians died waiting for the care that they need. So this is a sector that is absolutely rife with issues. What I'd love to see tonight is the government break a habit of a lifetime and just express a little bit of contrition for the fact that they've allowed things to get to this point, which has caused enormous agony for thousands and thousands of Australian families.
Indeed. Mike Baird's wish list was, I don't think, too demanding. Is yours similar?
I would add a few more things. So just firstly to say to Mike Baird's wish list, I think one of the things I've learned while I've been working in aged care policy is that nothing can really truly change in this sector until we address the staggering issues facing the aged care workforce. We've got an aged care workforce which is profoundly understaffed, which is badly paid while doing some of the most complex and important work in the community. And there's no real reward there for workers to skill themselves up, nor do they have the time or the resources to be able to do it. So I think he was very right to put workforce issues right front and centre there. But something else that's very important to Labor is having transparency and proper regulation of this sector, Laura. We know more money needs to go into aged care. Everyone agrees with that. But I don't want those extra dollars funding another Maserati for an aged care CEO. I want it to go to care for vulnerable Australians. That's why the constituents in my electorate are paying taxes into that system. Laura, just one more thing Anthony Albanese talked about last week was the importance of dementia care. This is a side of aged care that hasn't got a lot of airtime. In fact, it is a very large amount of the work that's done in aged care today. And the Royal Commission described the dementia care in aged care today as abysmal in one of its reports. So that's something that really needs to be properly addressed that Anthony Albanese's raised.
Yeah, you're right, that a lot of this is the government which needs to address some levels of funding, oversight and reskilling the workforce, and having that ratio from patients to care workers as well. But you mentioned the Maserati driving owners of some of these aged care centres. Quite frankly, some of them, and this was exposed during COVID, where we had most of our COVID deaths earning super profits and not putting enough resources back into their own centres. Surely that's something that can be fixed easily.
Yeah, I would have thought so, Laura. I mean, a government that's worth its salt would not be putting additional dollars into this sector without ensuring that those dollars are going to the care of vulnerable Australians. But I should just say there's a very mixed record within the aged care sector, and we've got some amazing providers that are doing the right thing. In fact, that are meeting many of the bars that the Royal Commission has set down as minimum standards in aged care. And then there are other providers that are charlatans that are taking money from the taxpayer that should be put towards care and doing other things with it. That's got to end if we want to see real reform here.
Just one final question about the workforce. I mean, we've got a big problem at the moment because our borders are closed and the aged care sector relies on skilled migrants from overseas, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. And indeed, we may have even lost some people from that sector in the last year. So whilst Josh Frydenberg is talking about reskilling that workforce and really driving that skill shortage, it can't happen quickly, can it?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Laura. So we've got an ageing population, and the Productivity Commission has told us that we're going to have to move from what are roughly 300,000 people working in aged care today to 1 million by 2050. So somehow we're going to have to grow this sector by 700,000 people over the next 30 years. We're not going to be able to do that when these are some of the lowest paid people in the economy. You can literally earn more stacking shelves in a supermarket today than you can caring for someone with very complex health needs who's in a very vulnerable state in an aged care home. So I think we are going to have to think really clearly about these workforce issues. And this is one of the big tests for the government tonight, Laura. Whatever they're promising on aged care, if they're not addressing fundamental issues about the way that this workforce is valued, we're never going to see real reform here. So that's something we'll be watching very closely.
Okay, we will too as well once we see these details later tonight. Clare O'Neill, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Laura.